Hey guys, what's up? It's Kevin for the win, and we're back for another edition of Diablo 3. Today on the channel, I am going over the Grace of Inarius set. We have a new build that I have taken from comments that have been left in various videos that we've done on the channel. So the Grace of Inarius set, 2-piece bonus, bone armor damage is increased by 1,000%. 4-piece, bone armor grants an additional 3% damage reduction per enemy hit. 6-piece bonus, bone armor activates a swirling tornado of bone, damaging nearby enemies for 1,000 weapon damage, and increases the damage they take from Necromancer by 15,000%, I believe. So we are using a full set of Inarius. We are also using the Deity's Binding. You gain additional 41% to curses. To help with that, we are also going to be using Tragul's Corroded Fang, which gives us the Cursed Scythe Ruin for the Grim Scythe. We're also going to be using Lost Time because we're going to be using a lot of cold skills that you will see in a second. Pay no mind to the bracers. They're just there as a placeholder. Haunt of Voxio, just so we can have a little bit of minions, and it's a primal that I like. Crisp and Sentence, definitely I recommend for this, and a Convention of Elements Ring, very important, so we can get some damage windows going. Now, for the skills, primary, Grim Scythe, Cursed Scythe. This works with Tragul's Corroded Fang and Deity's Binding. We're going to be using for secondary, Death Nova Blight, which is actually pretty good. The main source of damage is going to be coming from Corpse Explosion, Close Quarters, very important to run that. We're going to be using Blood Rush. We're also going to be using Land of the Dead, Frozen Lands. That way we can get massive amounts of Bone Explosion, or Corpse Explosions, I should say, off. We're also going to be using Bone Armor, Dislocation. For the passive, Stand Alone, Blood is Power, because we are using some blood skills. Final Service, and Spreading Malediction. For Kanai's Cube, Navarre's Black Death, very important to run that. Grasp of Essence, very important to boost Corpse Explosion. And we are also using a Wisdom of Klon. That way we can keep the amount of stacks of Bone Armor super high. We get up to 15 stacks with this. So I'm going to do things a little bit differently here. I am going to do a Greater Rift of 45, 55, 65, and then I'm going to do a 75. The reason I am doing it this way is I want to show you how it works on lower tier and then going to super high tier where we are past Torment 16. The problem really with Grace of Inarius has always been that the Burn Tornado doesn't do a whole bunch of damage as you get higher up in the Greater, so it's important to demonstrate how you're really going to want to handle higher Greater Risk, but we want to show you how it does on lower ones first. So first thing you're going to do when you get into your Greater Rift is you are going to cast a Bone Tornado. And in order to do this, basically just going to cast your Bone Armor. So we cast the Bone Armor, we get 5 stacks going. You attack with Cursed Scythe to place curses on that. Anything that dies, then you will either take out mobs near you with Corpse Explosion, or you will use your Nova to attack things. Now, keep in mind, certain monsters will be a little tankier. That's why I recommend using the Nova, Death Nova, and then there are certain monsters where it's better to take them out with Corpse Explosion. Now, it's very important as you're beginning a Greater Rift that you keep an eye on your Bone Armor. You always want, for this particular build that I'm using, to have your stacks at 15. 15 means that it will stay active long enough for you to be able to do damage with your skills effectively. So this pretty much shows you an example right here of that. So anytime there are a lot of corpses near you, since we are not using any devouring skills, what you want to do is cast the Corpse Explosion. It does a lot of damage thanks to the Grasp of Essence and Close Quarters. So in reality, that's where most of your damage is going to be coming from. This was recommended by all of you on the channel. You guys have left a tremendous amount of Diablo 3 video comments over the course of the last several months. I know Inarius was a set that, when I originally covered it, was very popular on the channel. People wanted me to go back and gave some suggestions as to adding the Cursed Scythe, Tragul's Corroded Fang combo, which was, you saw here, we incorporated, and then some people recommended Corpse Explosion because they wanted to see a Corpse Explosion build, so we did that, and just recently somebody asked if I could do Inarius, so finally giving you guys what you want. Now, in terms of optimization for this particular armor, my recommendation, first and foremost, would be on your helm, run crit hit chance 6.0%. If you can get a better roll of it, definitely go for it. On your gloves, my recommendation would be crit hit chance 6.0 to 8.0%. It really depends on necessarily the roll you get via a Ancient Legendary or Primal Ancient Legendary. I would also recommend getting attack speed on your gloves because that increases the amount of damage that you'll be able to do because you're going to be able to attack things faster. I also recommend crit hit damage 50%. And that way you can maximize crit hit. Now, something people tend to forget about the Necromancer class is that they require a lot of investment in critical hit damage because they need critical hits to be able to perform well at high greater rifts. Now, for Land of the Dead, primarily what you're using it here for is getting off free corpse explosions because it allows you to cast corpse skills for a short duration of time. So it's basically getting off infinite corpse explosion. My recommendation for particularly Land of the Dead is that kind of try to save it for when there are a lot of mobs on screen. Don't really waste it on 3 or 4 mobs unless it's like mobs that you know are going to take you out, or it's the Rift Guardian. If it's the Rift Guardian, cast that Land of the Dead and just go kamikaze on them. Now, further optimization, my recommendation is because Inarius' bone armor is pretty weak on its own, even with the 6-piece bonus, I recommend investing in bone armor. Get bone armor to 15% if possible. I would recommend also getting the corpse explosion wherever possible to 15% because remember that's going to be where your main source of damage is coming from. Don't really worry so much on Curse Scythe. I don't think it's as important as it is trying to get your bone armor maximized. Now this particular armor can benefit also from cooldown reduction. That way it takes less time to activate your bone armors, which remember we're focusing on mostly. Okay, so there I cast Land of the Dead and went Corpse Explosion, Death Nova. Unfortunately, it died right as I cast Land of the Dead, so that was kind of funny. Usually, if it survives long enough, you go Land of the Dead and Corpse Explosion. That's how that would have played out. Hopefully on a higher grader, if you could see. Now, for gems, my recommendation is Bane of the Trap, Bane of the Stricken, and Goak of Swiftness. That way you can get Land of the Dead's cooldown super fast. And keep in mind, since you're always physically attacking with your Curse Scythes and your Corpse Explosions and your Death Novas and your Reborn Tornado as it's hitting things counts as an attack, you're going to be able to have your Land of the Dead way more active than less necessarily on a set like the Rothman armor, which I covered. And Rothman, people have been giving me comments about how it works with Army of the Dead and not Land of the Dead. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that that's the way the armor works. That's how I read it on screen. But not really anybody uses the Army of the Dead variations for Rothman. Maybe I'll go back and show you guys how it works with Army of the Dead so you can see why it's still pretty much the F-tier armor. Subsequently, for this particular build, you could optimize this a bit further if you wanted to. Let's say you wanted to get a bit more damage out of this and more optimization than what I'm currently showing you. You could change out the pants, and you could also change out your boots for Captain Crimson, because remember, we are having Goak of Swiftness on here, and if you played around with your cooldown reduction, you could get more cooldown reduction, and that would work. So Captain Crimson, you could push this set probably to maybe even the 2000k range. I didn't have time to get another Captain Crimson set. Remember, I have a Captain Crimson set for my Pestilence Corpse Lance build, and that's particularly built stat-wise and stat distribution for Pestilence. So I wouldn't want to run it on this particular armor because it's kind of modified for that particular set, and I'm kind of running low on box space at the moment, which was something that actually came up in comments as to a different raid that we did. So yeah, I got to micromanage some of my box space. There's a lot of stuff that I have to go through, look at some rings, and see if I don't need as many rings as I have. I have like a whole bunch of conventional elements and whatnot. Strategy here for Graver 55 is still the same thing. It's going to be cast your bone armor, get it to 15 stacks when possible. You're going to use your Death Nova to take things out. You're going to also apply your curses with your Grim Scythe. So usually you want to Scythe first and then go Death Nova. And then if there's a lot of mobs on screen, go Corpse Explosion. That's kind of the rotation window you are going to be wanting to maximize for the most part. You do not have to run Haunt of Oxio. This is pretty much just something I am running for giggles at this point because it's a Primal Ancient Legendary, and it kind of helps because they are copying the skills that I am particularly using for this particular artwork. So Alright, so here we go. Bone armor, getting the stack. Always with this armor, make sure you are keeping your bone armor maximum. Then swing Curse Scythe, Death Nova. Swing Curse Scythe, Death Nova. Curse Scythe, Death Nova. Then when you see a lot of enemies on screen, go Corpse Explosion. If you see a ton of enemies on screen and you have Land of the Dead, activate the Land of the Dead and then go infinite Corpse Explosions. I try to make sure that I maintain my Land of the Dead for when there's large area mobs. Keep in mind, do that. Most of the time, you're going to be able to take everything out with your Curse Scythe, Death Nova, Corpse Explosion combo. Those are the rotations you want to do. You usually want to reserve your Land of the Dead for when there's a whole bunch of things on screen. Case in point here would be kind of okay, but I can still deal with it, so I'm not going to activate the Land of the Dead. I'm going to save it for a better area. So again, same rotation. Swing that Scythe, Death Nova, Corpse Explosion. I might use my Land of the Dead here because that's a good opportunity to get rid of some of these things. Alright, so there. That was a good stretch of monsters, so that was kind of a good use of your Land of the Dead where you're able to get off those infinite curse. Then I go Bone Armor. Remember, you got to keep your Bone Armor always up because you want to be able to be very tanky, and also you want to be able to deal the most damage possible. This is basically the most optimal way to play Inarius, in my personal opinion, is now. I have experimented on the channel previously with Singularity Mages on Inarius, and I particularly didn't like it because I felt like I was taking too long to clear things. This is still, now for all intents and purposes, a push build, but it is a faster variant where it has you being more active and proactive to actually get faster clear times. So same strategy, Curse Scythe, Death Nova, Corpse Explosion only when I think I really need to, or there's a lot of enemies near me. Try to save your explosions for that big push where there's a lot of enemies near you guys. You definitely want to do that. Now, in terms of where Grace of Inarius stands for the Necromancer class for Diablo III, Grace of Inarius is still kind of considered one of those C to D tier armors, not often used. It's something that shows up a lot as your seasonal journey, or your Hadred's Gift, I should say, for Diablo 3. See, this was a good opportunity to get off a whole bunch of Corpse Explosions there, guys. That's why I did that. Now, keep in mind, like, Inarius is really C, D tier. In terms of tier right now, it would be... S tier would be Legacy of Dreams, Poison Scythe, and the Masquerade of the Burning Carnival, which is the Bone Spear Necromancer build. Those are the two that performed the best. After that, I would say you are probably having a pretty decent time at lower Greater Rifts, probably about Torment 13 Mac with Pestilence Corpse Lands. Then I would probably put Grace of Inarius somewhere after that. Then I would probably say Catragul's Corroded Fang, and then Rothmon as bottom tier. Now, don't fight me on that. That's just my personal opinion. You might have a different opinion than me, and you're more than welcome to share that in the comments, and we can discuss that constructively as to why you feel differently in terms of tier list. But really, when it comes to Necromancer, the two armors that you see really dominating leaderboard placement in terms of Necromancer really is Bone Spear and Legacy of Dreams, Poison Scythe variants, because they're just really easy to get all the pieces that you need, and you don't have to optimize them necessarily super fast to be able to push very high Greater Rifts, as opposed to Inarius, where in order to really push this armor in super high Greater Rifts, case in point, we are now doing a Greater Rift 65. You're going to see that the clear times go down a little bit significantly. It becomes more of a push build here, but we have to incorporate a couple different strategies here. Like, now it really is where this particular dungeon layout, we're going to rely more heavily on our Land of the Dead to be able to deal damage. Case in point here, this is where you can maximize your Land of the Dead. And the good thing about this is because we're doing so much damage as it is, and we're hitting so many different targets, it's going to be able to get our cooldown back from Land of the Dead super fast because we're using Goraka Swiftness. Now, in terms of augmentation, my recommendation usually, if you're playing seasonal character, I know it's hard to get gems up to level 100 or 80. That's hard to do. So I would say if you're playing this as a seasonal armor, or you're just experimenting in season right now, you can augment your gems at probably level 50 or 60 if you're struggling to get that Greater Rift 70 clear. And then you can always overwrite an augmentation that you do on an armor, which is a very common misconception that people have, and you can augment your armor that way, and then you could go back and put like level 80 and 100. Preferably you want level 100 gems, but unless you are pushing Greater Rifts 90s, 100s, 110, you're not going to see level 100 gems unless you're doing that really with a group that is particularly carrying you. So, you know what? You do what you can. Inarius really is not going to get you a high leaderboard placement for your seasonal journey. This is a better armor to kind of rock than the Rothmon set, which is the Hadrian's Gift for Season 23 of Diablo, so keep that in mind. If you happen to come across this and you have Rothmon and Rothmon's not cutting it, definitely switch to this. This will do much, much better. It's pretty easy to build because you don't need too many things, and most of the things that drop are very common. Grasp of Essence might take you a little bit to get, but even then I've seen that drop quite a bit. The hardest thing might be the Wisdom of Kalan because it doesn't have a very high drop rate and roll rate naturally, but definitely something you can look into. If you're playing this with Season, character recommendation, obviously get your Intelligence Paragon farmed up there high, then go for crit hits because you need your critical chance very high because it is Necromancer and they rely heavily on crit hit chance, as I mentioned before. Other things that you definitely want to do, movement speed. Attack speed is kind of important because we're using Curse Scythe. And then, again, I do recommend, this is a fun armor to use at lower Greater Rifts. Once you get to Greater Rift 75, which will be coming up hopefully shortly, you're going to see it's taking slower and significantly longer to clear things. Why is that? Because the 6-piece bonus is not dealing nearly as much damage as some armor sets that have 6-piece bonuses, which means then we have to rely on tricks like Corpse Explosion. That was a waste of a Corpse Explosion right there because I thought there were a lot more enemies on screen. So that was definitely not maximizing our Corpse Explosion. We did get a couple decent kills out of there. One good thing about this particular armor is if you're farming on high level, you're able to maintain your Massacre bonus significantly high, which is good because if we're maintaining our Massacre bonus, we can level up our Paragon super fast. So that's kind of one of the benefits of running this particular armor because you can consistently keep your Massacre bonuses significantly high. Sometimes you could even push like 400, 500 kill streak. Depending on the dungeon layout, it's really a matter of RNG. This is actually one of the dungeon layouts that Grace of Inarius actually likes to see because there's always constantly enemies coming at us. And keep in mind that the way Diablo III enemies are programmed, they tend to come towards you, which is kind of good because if you confuse with Bone Tornado, Curse Scythe, and Death Nova, and then other things are falling into you, that's when you follow through with Corpse Explosion and just optimize the amount of damage because those dead bodies actually turn into ammunition for Corpse Explosion. So that's kind of how you want to think in terms of thought processing when you're using armor. Always keep the bone armor stacks maximum. Swing your Curse Scythe a couple times so you can get curses off. Death Nova, most things are going to implode. You see a whole bunch of bodies on the floor, and there's more enemies coming at you, then just set off the explosions because you're going to take those guys out. So there's a nice synergy with this particular build of Inarius as opposed to an earlier build that I showed. So if I were recommending a build for Inarius, I say this is particularly the more optimal way to go with it because you're going to get more efficiency out of it as opposed to Singularity Mage build. I've seen some pretty weird builds out there, but I was using some weird stuff like Command Skeletons and Singularity Mages. It was just really off-the-wall thing because there's so many different things. The one thing about Inarius is that you can play around with it. Now, you saw the Rift Guardian dive super fast because I saved my Land of the Dead, and also, keep in mind, swing Curse Scythe, Death Nova, and if there's already bodies on the floor, Corpse Explosion, you're just dealing a tremendous amount of damage, so definitely keep that in mind. Always, if you can, try to keep a Land of the Dead saved for Rift Guardian because it just makes life easier. Again, our gems that we are using is Goak of Swiftness, Bane of the Trapped, because we are slowing things down, and we are also stunning them whenever we cast a Bone Armor because we're using Dislocation as our skill. So you're also able to maximize. Now, Greater Rift 65, 4-minute clear time for something that's necessarily a push armor that's actually pretty good. I'm going to do one more Greater Rift just to show you why I say it starts falling off once you get past Torment 16, or at Torment 16 for that matter. So this is Greater Rift 75. What we're going to do here, same strategy, but we have to switch it up. So first things first, always make sure you get that Bone Armor off first, because if not, you see, you take a lot of hit. Next, Land of the Dead, because we saw a Elite Pack way too early on, so we're going to get those free Corpse Explosions off just to take care of some stuff. Good thing is Land of the Dead works for 10 seconds. When you see that monsters are stopped frozen in place, that means your Land of the Dead is over. So then you got to go back to the rotations, which is making sure you maintain your bone armor. Then go Curse Scythe, Death Nova, Corpse Explosion. Always try to follow that cycle. Now, the thing about it is with the Bone Tornado, which is a 6-piece bonus on higher Greater Rifts, it's kind of like tickling the monsters, so it's not doing as much damage, which means you have to rely on Earth Skill. Also, because it's not doing a tremendous amount of damage, you're kind of losing out on that 6-piece bonus a bit. Also, keep in mind that things are hitting you harder. Things have more HP. Don't get stressed out if you take a death, because once you're on Greater Rift 75, you are playing on Torment 16 difficulty, which is the highest difficulty. Case in point here, sometimes you have an enemy that shields, and you have to be careful, and you have to move back. Don't be stressed out if you take a death. Usually, Greater Rift 75 and above, people are going to kind of struggle to try to clear things. This is where Inarius starts to underperform. You can push higher. It requires more optimal rolls on your armor. Keep in mind that, like I always say, for all these video demonstrations, this is a work in progress. My sets are not full Primal Ancient Legendary, so my sets do not always have the most desired stats. When it comes to Diablo 3, it is not necessarily about the destination. It's about the journey. You could be playing Diablo 3 for years and not get the perfect stats and builds that you want for a armor. So, this did kind of come up in comments a little bit, in particular today, or actually it was yesterday. Like, if you see that something doesn't have necessarily desired stats, it's because everything's a work in progress. Some people get more lucky with the rolls, some people don't. I always say, though, definitely make sure you get as much crit damage as possible, because crit damage means exactly what it sounds like. You're doing critical hits, which means you're doing more damage. If you don't invest in critical damage, you are not going to be hitting things for the maximum amount of damage possible, which is why I always push in my armor sets that's one of the first things you should probably prioritize, even over intelligence. Intelligence is great. You can fix that up with gems. Now, if you want this fully optimized, this particular armor set, you would put an Amethyst gem in your home. You would put 2 topaz probably in your pants. You obviously want on your weapon the Emerald gem, Flawless, because you want the most critical hit damage for that. You can play around with the gems. Obviously, I'm going to link you guys to a guide in the description for this particular build, which will talk about gems and tell you how to optimize. My videos are to show you and showcase what the armor is capable of and the cycles and windows that you should be capitalizing on to get the most efficient plays out of your armor build. So keep in mind, everything's a work in progress. I definitely do like constructive criticism. I hit 1271 Paragon here, so that'll address the question as to how much Paragon. I am doing this off-season. I haven't played too much of Season 23 of Diablo yet because I'm just not a fan of pets. I prefer wings as basically seasonal incentives, which is why we have not covered that. Really done too much seasonal character. I also want to probably do a hardcore run somewhere in the near future. Alright, so here's a good example of you have to micromanage. Curse Scythe, Death Nova, Corpse Explosions take out things. You have to really get a bit more proficient at maintaining the windows. Always keep Bone Armor active. As long as you keep that stack at 15, you won't have to stress things too much. Also make sure the Death Novas are being cast after a Curse Scythe. That way you can take advantage of the fact that things are being applied curses to, and then you're just taking extra damage. I gotta move out of the way here because I'll take another death. Also, when you get higher up with Inarius, don't get super aggro. You have to be careful. If you see something's going to explode, don't worry about losing that massacre bonus, because that is something you don't necessarily need unless you're trying to Paragon farm. And if you are, you're going to be using a more optimized armor than this to do that, like Bone Spear Necromancer. If you're interested in any of the S-tier builds for the Necromancer class, you can find them on our playlist. There are many, many, many videos for Diablo 3 covering a wide range of armors, everything from S-tier armors to F-tier armors to even B and C-tier armors. I like to cover every armor. At the beginning of the season, wanted to cover basically everything that's a Hadrid's Gift first, as well as armors that got some revisions to them, whether it be nerfs and buffs, and then I'm going to go and do some armors that were highly requested or haven't been covered in quite a while. So that's kind of how I'm rolling with Season 3 of Diablo. Something that people have been asking about in social media as well as sometimes in comments is, will we be covering Diablo 3 on the channel? Yes. When the alpha or beta goes live for consoles, because I'm playing on the Nintendo Switch platform, we will cover Diablo 2 on the channel. Until that day, we can't do videos. I'm not playing Diablo on a PC. I do not have a PC that runs those particular games. Very expensive. I also prefer to play on console. That's my preferred choice controller. I know mouse and keyboard is a more optimal playstyle for many, but I prefer my personal preferences. But we will be covering Diablo 2 on the channel when we have access to it, and definitely when it's officially released, we will probably switch things up a little bit in Diablo content. So, pretty much that was a very good run. This is Greater Rift 75 for those of you asking, so this is Tournament 16. We could push a Greater Rift 80 in this armor. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to make this video way too long. I prefer to kind of give you a showcase from weak to strong Greater Rift. So that was 5-minute clear time, which is very respectable. Way better than the previous Inarius build. This came from you guys, the viewers, putting in your input. So I took a little bit from everybody's suggestion and put it together to make a more optimized Inarius build. Let's see if we get at least some decent loot here. I should also mention, this is very important, that Diablo video content is changing a little bit for the next couple of weeks. Obviously, you know, I don't cover just Diablo 3 content on the channel. We also cover a wide range of games, particularly Monster Hunter Rise, which recently dropped. I do very similar types of videos like I do for Diablo 4 Monster Hunter, where I show you armors and optimal builds. So if you're a fan of Monster Hunter, definitely make sure to check that out. But Diablo videos are now going to be on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Monster Hunter Rise videos will be Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays for the schedule for at least the immediate future. Obviously, as new stuff comes out, like, let's say, Diablo 2, maybe things will change on the schedule a little bit more to show more Diablo content. Unfortunately, when it comes to Diablo 3 Season 23, there's not too much we can go over. Like, the next type of objective I have to cover, besides some of requested armors that people want me to go back and do, is the follower. As you can see here with the follower, I don't have my follower really well equipped with the Eminent abilities. I will be doing videos on the followers in the future. It's just taking me a little longer to do those particular types of content because I've just covered a wider range of games, guys. So, you know, I'm all over the place trying to cover everything, but we will be doing follower guides. That's something that's coming for those of you who are curious about how the follower works. So, alright guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Make sure to give this video a like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.